I stood in that sterile conference room watching my manager Richard announce the promotion I had earned after 13 flawless years. Instead, he handed the senior marketing director position to Madison, his 23-year-old daughter, who had started 2 months ago as an intern. The room erupted in applause. I forced a smile, shook Richard's hand, and congratulated Madison warmly. Then I calmly walked to my desk, typed my resignation letter, printed it, and placed it on Richard's desk. When he read it minutes later, his face drained of color, and he screamed across the office. 13 years ago, I walked through the glass door of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions in downtown Denver for the first time. My name is Martha, and back then I was 26 years old, fresh-faced, and determined to prove myself in a male-dominated industry. I clutched my portfolio tighter than necessary, wearing my best navy blazer from Target, and hoping nobody would notice my hands trembling slightly. Richard was just a team lead then, barely 30 himself, with an easy smile and genuine enthusiasm that made me believe this place could become home. During my interview, he asked thoughtful questions about my vision for digital marketing integration, nodding appreciatively at my responses about customer journey mapping and conversion optimization. When he offered me the marketing assistant position, I felt like I had won the lottery. Those early years shaped everything I became. While other employees watched the clock counting minutes until 5 o'clock, I immersed myself in learning every aspect of our business. I studied client histories during lunch breaks, researched competitor strategies on weekends, and volunteered for projects nobody else wanted. When our biggest client, Morrison Electronics, threatened to leave because their previous account manager had botched their product launch campaign, I spent 3 consecutive nights crafting a recovery strategy that not only saved the account, but increased their annual spend by 40%. Richard noticed my dedication. He became my mentor, teaching me advanced negotiation techniques and introducing me to key industry contacts at networking events. When he got promoted to department manager 2 years later, he recommended me for his former position. I was 28 and hungry for more responsibility. The sacrifices started small but grew larger each year. I missed my sister's wedding because our pharmaceutical client, Healthwise, needed emergency crisis management after their competitor launched attack ads. I skipped Christmas dinner 3 years in a row, staying in the office to finalize campaign strategies for clients who demanded January launches. My boyfriend David left after I canceled our anniversary trip to handle the Cascade Electronics emergency that threatened to cost us our second largest account. But every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw the results. My campaigns consistently outperformed projections. Client retention rates in my portfolio exceeded 92% compared to the industry average of 68%. I brought in new business through referrals, turning satisfied clients into enthusiastic advocates who recommended Pinnacle to their networks. My performance reviews read like love letters. Richard wrote things like, "Martha demonstrates exceptional strategic thinking and client relationship management, and her innovative approach to integrated marketing has become our gold standard." HR Director Patricia consistently rated me as exceeds expectations in every category. Chief Financial Officer William once told Richard within my earshot that I was the most valuable asset this company has. 6 months ago, our senior marketing director announced his retirement. The position represented everything I had worked toward for over a decade. It meant overseeing strategic accounts, mentoring junior staff, and having real influence over company direction. More importantly, it came with the respect and recognition I had earned through years of unwavering commitment. I prepared for that role like I was studying for the bar exam. I researched emerging trends in artificial intelligence integration, analyzed case studies from successful campaigns across different industries, and developed comprehensive strategies for expanding our client base into new markets. I created detailed presentations showing how we could increase revenue by 30% within 18 months through targeted outreach and service diversification. My colleagues Jessica and Tom encouraged me constantly. Jessica, who worked in account management, would stop by my cubicle and say things like, "Martha, that position has your name written all over it, and nobody else here has half your experience or track record." Tom from Creative Services joked that they should just skip the interview process and hand me the keys to the executive office. But something changed in Richard during the weeks leading up to the announcement. Our regular Friday afternoon check-ins suddenly got canceled. When I tried to schedule time to discuss my interest in the promotion, his assistant Sarah would tell me he was swamped with budget meetings or dealing with urgent client issues. He avoided eye contact during staff meetings and seemed uncomfortable whenever I contributed ideas or updates on my projects. The morning of the announcement, I arrived at the office 30 minutes early, wearing my lucky charcoal gray suit and carrying the leather portfolio my parents had given me for my 30th birthday. I felt confident and prepared, knowing that my qualifications spoke for themselves. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as employees gathered for what everyone assumed would be a formality. That confidence lasted exactly until Sarah Richards' assistant approached my desk with worry lines creasing her forehead. She glanced around nervously, making sure nobody else was listening, then leaned close to my ear. "Martha, I need to tell you something about Madison before the meeting starts," she whispered urgently. "She's not just some intern. Richard's been planning this for months." Sarah's words hit me like ice water in my veins, but before I could process their full meaning, Richard's voice boomed across the office, announcing that the meeting was about to begin. Sarah squeezed my shoulder apologetically and hurried back to her desk, leaving me to walk into that conference room with my stomach churning and my mind racing. I took my usual seat at the long mahogany table, surrounded by familiar faces that suddenly seemed different somehow. Jessica offered me a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tom stared down at his notepad, scribbling meaningless doodles with unusual intensity. Even Patricia from Human Resources appeared unusually fidgety, adjusting her glasses repeatedly and avoiding my gaze entirely. Richard strode to the front of the room with Madison trailing behind him like an eager puppy. She wore a crisp white blouse and navy skirt that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her blonde hair perfectly styled in loose curls that bounced when she walked. At 23, she possessed the kind of polished confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself or worry about paying bills. "Good morning, everyone!" Richard began, his voice carrying an artificial enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. "As you know, we're here to announce our new senior marketing director. This decision wasn't made lightly, and I want to assure you that we considered all qualified candidates very carefully." My hands gripped the edge of the table as he continued his speech, each word feeling like another nail in my professional coffin. He talked about fresh perspectives and innovative thinking and bringing new energy to our established practices. The buzzwords fell from his lips with practiced ease, but I could hear the underlying nervousness in his tone. "I'm thrilled to announce that Madison Taylor will be joining our leadership team as Senior Marketing Director effective immediately." The room erupted in applause that sounded hollow and forced. I watched my colleagues' faces as they clapped, seeing the mixture of shock, confusion, and guilt written across their expressions. Nobody had expected this outcome, and everyone knew it was wrong, but they played their parts anyway because that's what corporate culture demands. Madison stepped forward to accept the congratulations, her speech clearly rehearsed, but delivered with the kind of nervous energy that betrayed her complete lack of experience. She talked about leveraging synergies and optimizing customer touchpoints and implementing data-driven solutions, all marketing jargon that sounded impressive but meant absolutely nothing when strung together randomly. I forced myself to smile and nod at appropriate moments, my face feeling like a plastic mask that might crack at any second. Inside, 13 years of loyalty and dedication were crumbling into dust. Every late night, every missed holiday, every relationship I had sacrificed for this company suddenly felt like a cruel joke played on someone naive enough to believe that hard work and merit actually mattered. When the meeting ended, I stood with everyone else and joined the receiving line to congratulate Madison personally. My feet moved automatically, carrying me forward while my mind struggled to process what had just happened. When my turn came, I extended my hand with genuine warmth and looked directly into her eyes. "Congratulations, Madison," I said, my voice steady and professional. "I'm sure you'll do great things in this role." She beamed at me with the kind of innocent enthusiasm that made my heart break a little more. "Thank you so much. Martha Richard has told me wonderful things about your work here. I'm really looking forward to learning from experienced team members like you." I shook Richard's hand next, maintaining that same composed smile while looking directly into his eyes. "Congratulations on finding such a qualified candidate," I said, letting just enough emphasis fall on the word qualified to plant a seed of doubt in his mind. Then I walked calmly back to my desk while my colleagues dispersed to their various offices and cubicles, whispering among themselves about the surprising announcement. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, the same one I had occupied for over a decade, and opened my computer to create a new document. My resignation letter took exactly 7 minutes to write. I kept it professional, polite, and devastatingly brief. "Dear Richard, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, effective immediately. After careful consideration, I have decided to pursue new opportunities that better align with my career goals and personal values. I appreciate the experiences I have gained during my 13 years with the company and wish you continued success. Sincerely, Martha Wilson." I printed the letter on the company letterhead, signed it with my favorite blue ink pen, and walked directly to Richard's office. He was still in the conference room basking in congratulations from upper management, so I placed the letter in the center of his desk where he couldn't possibly miss it. Back at my desk, I began the surreal process of packing 13 years of professional life into 2 cardboard boxes from the supply closet. My industry awards client appreciation plaques and photos from successful campaign launches, all the tangible evidence of my contributions to this company's success, fit into surprisingly little space. As I wrapped my coffee mug in tissue paper, I noticed something strange behind my computer monitor. There was a small USB drive wedged between the wall and the back edge of my desk, almost completely hidden from view. I had never seen it before, and it definitely didn't belong to me. Curious, I pulled it free and slipped it into my purse without thinking much about it. 20 minutes later, as I was taping up my second box, Richard's voice echoed across the entire office floor. "Martha, what the hell is this supposed to mean?" His face had gone completely white, and he was waving my resignation letter in the air like a surrender flag. "Is this some kind of joke?" Every head in the office turned to stare at us, creating an audience for what was clearly meant to be a private confrontation. I stood up slowly, maintaining my composure while he lost his completely. "It's my resignation, Richard. I thought that was fairly clear from the header and content. You can't just resign. You have responsibilities, you have clients who depend on you." I picked up my boxes and looked at him with the kind of calm that only comes from finally understanding exactly where you stand. "Those clients will have to depend on Madison now. I'm sure she'll figure it out." And with that, I walked toward the elevator, leaving behind 13 years of my life and stepping into an uncertain future that somehow felt more promising than anything I was leaving behind. The parking garage felt like a sanctuary after the toxic atmosphere of that office. I sat in my Honda Accord with the engine running, trying to process what had just happened while my hands finally stopped shaking. That's when I remembered the USB drive I had found behind my computer. Curiosity got the better of me, so I pulled out my laptop and plugged in the mysterious device. What I discovered made my blood run cold and my heart race simultaneously. The drive contained dozens of audio files, each one labeled with dates and participant names. Someone had been systematically recording Richard's phone conversations for weeks. The first file I opened was dated 3 weeks ago. Richard's voice came through my laptop speakers clearly mid-conversation with Patricia from Human Resources. "Look, Patricia, we both know Martha deserves this promotion on paper. Richard was saying, his tone casual and conspiratorial. But Madison needs the experience, and frankly, Martha's too comfortable here. She's not going anywhere whether we promote her or not. Patricia's response made my stomach turn. Have you considered restructuring the position requirements? We could add qualifications that favor Madison's background, maybe emphasize social media experience or recent educational credentials. That's brilliant. Make it look like we're modernizing the role rather than just passing over Martha. I clicked on another file from 2 weeks ago. This one featuring a three-way conversation between Richard, Patricia, and Chief Financial Officer William. My concern is legal exposure, William was saying. Martha's performance record is flawless. If she files a discrimination complaint, we don't have much defense. Richard actually laughed at the suggestion. Martha's too loyal to cause trouble. She's been here 13 years without making waves. Besides, where else is she going to go? We'll just tell her the position requires fresh thinking, that her experience might actually be a disadvantage in today's market. What about the other employees? Patricia asked. They all expect Martha to get promoted. There might be morale issues. People adjust, Richard replied dismissively. They might grumble privately, but nobody's going to risk their own job by speaking up publicly. Corporate loyalty trumps personal feelings every time. The final file I played was from just 5 days ago, and it contained the most damaging evidence yet. Richard was speaking with someone I didn't recognize, but the conversation made it clear they were discussing how to handle the transition period. The key is making Martha feel valued while keeping her expectations low, Richard explained. I've been avoiding one-on-one meetings because I don't want to lie to her face, but after the announcement, we'll emphasize how much we need her expertise to help train Madison. And if she threatens to quit, she won't. Martha's too invested in this place to walk away. She's missed weddings and holidays for us. Her whole identity is wrapped up in being the dedicated employee. Besides, even if she did quit, we'd just promote someone else from within and save the salary difference. That last comment hit me like a physical blow. 13 years of sacrifice and dedication, and Richard saw me as nothing more than a convenient doormat who could be counted on to accept whatever scraps they threw my way. As I sat there listening to my professional reputation being dissected and dismissed, my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed numbers I recognized as major clients, the very people whose accounts had made Richard look successful and kept Pinnacle profitable. The first call was from Daniel Morrison, CEO of Cascade Electronics, our third largest account. Martha, thank God I caught you, he said without preamble. We need to discuss the modifications to the Johnson campaign. My board is breathing down my neck about the timeline, and you're the only one who really understands our objectives. I took a deep breath before responding. Daniel, I appreciate your confidence in my work, but I'm no longer with Pinnacle as of today. You'll need to work with Madison Taylor, the new senior marketing director. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice carried a mixture of shock and disbelief. What do you mean you're no longer there? Martha, you are our account. You've handled our business for the past 8 years. You know our products, our market position, our strategic goals. Some new person can't just step in and pick up where you left off. I understand your concerns, Daniel, but I'm confident Madison will be able to help you. She's very enthusiastic about taking on new challenges. Enthusiastic? His voice rose with incredulity. Martha, we're talking about a $12 million campaign with a hard deadline 6 weeks from now. I don't need enthusiasm, I need expertise. I need someone who knows that our target demographic shifts by 15% every quarter and that our main competitor always launches counter campaigns in February. Before I could respond diplomatically, my phone buzzed with another incoming call. Then another. Within 10 minutes, I had missed calls from 6 different clients, all presumably learning about my departure and panicking about the future of their accounts. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard had spent years taking credit for client relationships I had built and maintained, but now that I was gone, it was becoming immediately apparent who had really been driving those successes. As I was contemplating how to handle the flood of client inquiries, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the other end identified herself as Elizabeth Chen, senior partner at Morrison and Associates, one of Denver's most prestigious employment law firms. Ms. Wilson, my name is Elizabeth Chen, and I specialize in workplace discrimination cases. I received a call this morning from someone who suggested I might want to speak with you about your recent experience at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. My heart started racing again. I'm not sure I understand. Who called you? I'm not at liberty to share that information yet, but I can tell you that my firm has been investigating Pinnacle for several months following complaints from other companies about their hiring and promotion practices. Your situation might be exactly the evidence we need to build a comprehensive case. Elizabeth explained that they had been collecting testimonies from multiple sources about systematic discrimination at Pinnacle, but they needed someone with extensive documentation and a clear pattern of unfair treatment to serve as the primary plaintiff. Would you be willing to meet with me this afternoon? I think you'll be very interested in what I have to share about your former employer's business practices. I agreed to meet her at 4 o'clock, giving me time to organize my thoughts and gather any relevant documents from my home office. As I drove away from Pinnacle's parking garage, for what I assumed would be the last time, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and anticipation. Behind me, Richard was probably fielding angry calls from clients and trying to figure out how to explain Madison's qualifications to people who had specifically requested to work with me. Ahead of me was a meeting with a lawyer who might help me turn my professional nightmare into a fight for justice. The USB drive sat in my purse like a ticking time bomb, containing evidence that could potentially expose years of discriminatory practices and corporate corruption. I had walked into that office building 13 years ago as a naive young woman, hoping to build a career. I was leaving as someone with the power to demand accountability and change. Elizabeth Chen's law office occupied the 32nd floor of downtown Denver's tallest building with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains. Everything about the space communicated success and competence, from the polished marble floors to the carefully curated modern art adorning the walls. Elizabeth herself was exactly what I had hoped for in a lawyer mid-40s, impeccably dressed and possessed of the kind of focused intensity that suggested she took every case personally. She greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a conference room where several manila folders were already arranged on the table. Before we begin, Martha, I want you to understand that what I'm about to share with you is confidential and potentially very significant, she said, settling into her chair across from me. My firm has been investigating Pinnacle Marketing Solutions for 8 months following complaints from 5 different companies about discriminatory hiring and promotion practices. She opened the first folder to reveal a stack of documents I didn't recognize. These are testimonies from former Pinnacle employees who contacted us after experiencing what they believe to be unfair treatment. 3 women passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified men. 2 minority candidates whose job offers were rescinded after initial acceptance, and 1 gentleman who was terminated after filing a complaint about his supervisor's inappropriate comments. My mouth went dry as Elizabeth continued. The pattern is clear and well documented, but until now, we haven't had a case strong enough to pursue significant legal action. Someone with your 10-year performance record and documentation could be exactly what we need. I told her about the USB drive and my discovery of the recorded conversations. Her eyes lit up with professional excitement as I played several of the most damaging files. She took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarification questions that demonstrated her thorough understanding of employment law. Martha, this evidence is extraordinary, she said when I finished. These recordings demonstrate not just discrimination, but premeditation and conspiracy. If we can authenticate them and verify the voices, this becomes a case with potentially devastating consequences for Pinnacle. She explained that my situation represented multiple violations of federal and state employment laws. The systematic exclusion of qualified candidates based on personal relationships constituted discrimination. The false documentation of performance reviews showed intentional deception. Most importantly, the recordings proved that senior leadership had conspired to deny me opportunities I had legally earned. What kind of outcomes are we talking about? I asked, still trying to process the magnitude of what she was suggesting. Financial compensation for lost wages and career advancement opportunities, certainly. Punitive damages for the emotional distress and reputational harm you've suffered. But beyond that, we're looking at federal oversight of their hiring practices, mandatory sensitivity training for all management personnel, and possible criminal charges if the financial irregularities go deep enough. As we discussed the potential timeline and strategy for pursuing legal action, my phone kept buzzing with calls and text messages. Elizabeth noticed my distraction and suggested I take a moment to handle whatever was clearly an urgent situation. The missed calls were from increasingly frantic clients who had learned about my departure and were demanding explanations. Daniel Morrison from Cascade Electronics had left 3 voicemails, each one more agitated than the last. Westfield Industries, Apex Technologies, and Sterling Communications had all called within the past hour. But the most interesting call came from Marcus Sullivan, CEO of Triumph Creative Agency, Pinnacle's biggest competitor in the Denver market. I stepped into the hallway to return his call, curious about why he would contact me directly. "Martha, I've been following your career for years," he said without preamble. "Your work on the Cascade turnaround campaign and the HealthWise crisis management was brilliant. I tried to recruit you 3 years ago, but my headhunter told me you weren't interested in leaving Pinnacle." "I wasn't at the time," I replied honestly. "I believed in what I was building there." "Well, circumstances change. I'm calling to offer you a position as creative director here at Triumph with full equity stake and creative control over your accounts. But more than that, I want you to know that Richard has been actively blacklisting you with other agencies for months." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" Marcus's voice carried a mixture of anger and disgust as he explained. "Richard's been calling around to other agency heads, claiming you're difficult to work with, that you take credit for team efforts, and that you're considering legal action against former employers. He's been systematically destroying your reputation to prevent you from finding alternative employment." This revelation added another dimension to Elizabeth's case. Not only had Pinnacle discriminated against me internally, but they had actively interfered with my ability to find work elsewhere. Marcus agreed to provide a sworn statement about Richard's attempts to damage my professional reputation. When I returned to this conference room, Elizabeth could see the anger written across my face. After I explained Marcus's revelation, she added defamation and interference with business relationships to our growing list of potential charges. "Martha, I want you to understand something important," she said, her tone becoming more personal. "This case isn't just about you anymore. It's about every qualified woman who's been passed over for someone's nephew or college buddy. It's about changing a culture that treats merit as secondary to personal connections." I agreed to move forward with the lawsuit and accepted Marcus's job offer with a start date strategically scheduled for the following Monday. This would give me time to organize my evidence while also demonstrating that I wasn't sitting idle, waiting for legal proceedings to resolve my financial situation. That weekend, I received a call from Jessica, my former colleague at Pinnacle. Her voice was shaky and nervous as she explained what had been happening since my resignation. "Martha, it's complete chaos here," she whispered clearly, calling from somewhere private. "Daniel Morrison showed up yesterday demanding to speak with you personally. When Richard tried to redirect him to Madison, Daniel literally said, 'I'm not discussing $12 million worth of business with someone who couldn't find our company headquarters without GPS.'" Jessica went on to explain that 3 major clients had formally requested contract reviews, citing concerns about account management continuity. Madison had attempted to handle a strategy meeting with Quantum Financial and accidentally presented a competitor's campaign proposal, apparently confusing the files Richard had given her. It gets worse, Jessica continued. Patricia's been frantically trying to create backdate performance reviews that justify you're not getting promoted. She asked me to sign a statement saying you had issues with teamwork and following direction. When I refused, she threatened my job. Tom had experienced similar pressure with William from finance, suggesting that employees who couldn't support management decisions might not be good cultural fits for the company's future direction. Martha, we want to help, Jessica said firmly. Tom and I have been talking, and we're willing to testify about everything we've witnessed. This isn't right, and we can't pretend otherwise anymore. By Sunday evening, my phone had become a constant stream of calls and messages. Former clients expressing concern about their account transitions, colleagues offering support and information, reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story, and lawyers from other firms hoping to represent me. Most surprisingly, I received a call from Robert Pinnacle, the company's 74-year-old founder, and Richard's father-in-law. His voice carried the weight of age and disappointment as he explained that he had been largely retired from daily operations, but had recently learned about the circumstances of my departure. Martha, I built that company on principles of fairness and merit, he said slowly. What Richard did goes against everything I believed in when I started Pinnacle 42 years ago. I want to meet with you personally if you're willing. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. 24 hours after I thought my career was over, I had a job offer from a competitor, a discrimination lawsuit with substantial evidence and the support of colleagues who were finally ready to speak up against injustice. Richard had intended to quietly sideline me while elevating his daughter, confident that I would accept the situation without causing trouble. Instead, his actions had created a perfect storm of legal consequences, client defections, and public scrutiny that threatened to destroy everything he had built. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that usually energized me for new challenges. Instead of driving to Pinnacle, I headed toward downtown Denver and my first day at Triumph Creative Agency. The contrast couldn't have been more stark, where Pinnacle's offices felt sterile and corporate Triumph buzzed with creative energy and genuine collaboration. Marcus Sullivan greeted me personally, introducing me to a diverse team of talented professionals who seemed genuinely excited about working together. My new office had windows facing the mountains and enough space for the awards and acknowledgments I had earned over 13 years in the industry. But even as I settled into this promising new environment, I could feel the earthquake I had triggered continuing to shake Pinnacle's foundation. Marcus showed me industry reports from the weekend that detailed the client exodus and speculation about internal turmoil at my former company. Daniel Morrison went public with his concerns, Marcus explained, handing me a copy of Marketing Rocky Mountain Weekly. His quote was particularly pointed: "When you lose someone of Martha Wilson's caliber, you don't lose an employee. You lose institutional knowledge that can't be replaced." He's not wrong. The article went on to detail how 3 major clients had formally requested contract reviews with 2 others, threatening to terminate their relationships entirely if suitable account management couldn't be provided. Madison's disastrous meeting with Quantum Financial had become industry gossip, with details somehow leaking to trade publications. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Chen called with updates on our legal strategy. The authentication of the USB drive recordings was proceeding smoothly, with voice recognition experts confirming the identities of all parties involved. More importantly, 2 additional former Pinnacle employees had contacted her firm after reading about the case in business journals. "We now have 9 potential plaintiffs," Elizabeth reported during our Tuesday morning call. "The pattern of discrimination is even clearer when viewed across multiple cases. Richard's behavior represents systematic bias, not isolated incidents." But Pinnacle wasn't accepting their fate quietly. By Wednesday, it became clear that Richard had hired Sterling Solutions, an expensive crisis management firm known for aggressive tactics and media manipulation. Their strategy became apparent when I started receiving legal documents questioning my right to use proprietary information and threatening criminal charges for theft of company materials. The USB drive legally belongs to Pinnacle, their lawyer claimed in a cease and desist letter. Ms. Wilson removed company property without authorization, and the contents represent confidential internal communications protected by attorney-client privilege. Elizabeth laughed when I showed her the letter. They're grasping at straws. Those recordings were made illegally without consent from all parties, which means Pinnacle can't claim ownership or protection. They're actually admitting to violations of wiretapping laws. More troubling were the personal attacks that began appearing in industry forums and social media. Anonymous posts questioned my mental stability, claiming I had become increasingly erratic in my final months at Pinnacle. Someone was spreading rumors that I had stolen client lists and was sharing confidential strategies with competitors. Marcus showed me printouts of particularly nasty comments that had appeared on professional networking sites. Martha Wilson was always difficult to work with, he read from one post. She took credit for team efforts and couldn't handle feedback. Pinnacle is better off without her drama. This has Richard's fingerprints all over it. The Dirty Tricks campaign intensified when I noticed a gray sedan following me home from work on Thursday evening. The same car appeared outside my apartment building the next morning with a man inside taking photographs of my daily routine. When I confronted him directly, he claimed to be conducting routine background verification for unnamed clients. Elizabeth immediately filed for a restraining order and added surveillance harassment to our growing list of charges. They're trying to intimidate you into dropping the case, she explained. It's actually helping us because it demonstrates consciousness of guilt. Friday brought the most disturbing development yet. I arrived at Triumph to find Marcus reviewing threatening emails that had been sent to our company's general contact address. The messages, obviously originating from Pinnacle's legal team, suggested that any company hiring me might face lawsuits for interfering with existing contractual obligations. They're claiming you signed a non-compete agreement, Marcus said, showing me copies of the emails. They're threatening to sue us for industrial espionage and client poaching. I had never signed any such agreement, and my original employment contract specifically stated that non-compete clauses were not part of Pinnacle's standard terms. Elizabeth requested copies of all my employment documents, confirming that Pinnacle was fabricating legal obligations that didn't exist. This is getting into criminal territory, she told me during an emergency meeting. False statements in legal documents, harassment, defamation, and now forged contracts. They're digging themselves deeper with every desperate move. The irony was that Pinnacle's aggressive tactics were actually accelerating their downfall. Daniel Morrison from Cascade Electronics called me directly after receiving legal threats about continuing to work with me through Triumph. Martha, this is insane, he said, his voice filled with indignation. They're threatening to sue us for choosing who we want to handle our marketing campaigns. I've been in business for 23 years, and I've never seen anything this unprofessional. Daniel's response was to immediately terminate all contracts with Pinnacle and transfer his entire account to Triumph, citing unethical business practices and inappropriate legal harassment of valued business partners. His public statement about the transfer was picked up by industry publications and Denver's business journals. Within 24 hours, 2 other major clients followed Daniel's example. Westfield Industries released a statement saying they cannot continue relationships with vendors who engage in vindictive legal harassment of former employees. Apex Technologies was more direct. We choose our marketing partners based on talent and integrity, not legal intimidation tactics. By the end of my first week at Triumph, I had brought 4 former Pinnacle clients with me, representing approximately $8 million in annual revenue. Marcus was ecstatic, but I felt conflicted about the collateral damage my situation was causing. Don't feel guilty, he assured me during our Friday afternoon debriefing. You didn't cause this crisis. Richard did when he chose nepotism over merit and then doubled down with harassment and legal threats. The clients are leaving because they're seeing Pinnacle's true character, not because you're manipulating them. That evening, I received an unexpected call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was elderly but firm, introducing himself as Robert Pinnacle, the company's founder. "Ms. Wilson, I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "I built that company to operate with integrity and fairness. What my son-in-law has done violates every principle I tried to instill in our corporate culture." Robert explained that he had been largely retired from daily operations for 5 years, but maintained some oversight through board meetings and financial reviews. Recent events had prompted him to investigate more thoroughly, and what he discovered horrified him. "Richard has been hiding financial irregularities for at least 2 years," Robert revealed. "Client payments diverted to unauthorized accounts, expense reports for services never rendered, and now this discrimination lawsuit with evidence I can barely believe." He wanted to meet with me personally, not as adversaries, but as people who both cared about the company's reputation and the employees who had been hurt by Richard's actions. "I'm prepared to testify against Richard if necessary," he said quietly. "And I'm working with the board to remove him from all positions within the company. What he's done is not just wrong, it's criminal." As I hung up the phone, I realized that my simple resignation letter had triggered something much larger than personal vindication. It had exposed systemic corruption that threatened to bring down an entire company while also creating opportunities for justice and meaningful change in how business gets conducted. Richard had gambled that I would quietly accept his decision and disappear without causing trouble. Instead, his underestimation of my character and the support of ethical people around me was about to cost him everything he had built on lies and favoritism. The second Monday of my employment at Triumph began with news that sent shockwaves through Denver's business community. Over the weekend, Quantum Financial's CEO Jennifer Walsh had forwarded Madison's insulting email to her entire network of business contacts, and by Monday morning it had gone viral across professional social media platforms. The email, which Madison had accidentally sent to Jennifer instead of her father, read, "Dad, the quantum people are too stupid to notice the difference between our real strategies and the stuff I'm making up. Just keep backing me up in meetings and this will all blow over once Martha stops causing drama." Marcus showed me screenshots of the email being shared and discussed on LinkedIn, Twitter, and industry forums. Business leaders across Colorado were expressing outrage at the unprofessional language and the clear admission of deception regarding client services. Jennifer Walsh's public response was swift and devastating. She issued a statement through Quantum Financial's corporate communications team. "We are immediately terminating all business relationships with Pinnacle Marketing Solutions due to admitted deceptive practices and unprofessional conduct. Any company that would deliberately mislead clients about their strategies and qualifications cannot be trusted with our marketing investments." The statement went on to detail how Quantum was demanding full refunds for services rendered in the past 6 months, citing breach of contract due to misrepresentation of qualifications and deliberate provision of substandard services. Elizabeth Chen called me before 9 a.m. with barely contained excitement. "Martha, this is the break we needed," she said, her voice practically vibrating with energy. "Madison's email is an admission of fraud that we can use not just in your discrimination case, but in a much broader investigation of Pinnacle's business practices." She explained that the email provided evidence of intentional deception regarding client services, which opened the door to criminal fraud charges and gave other affected clients grounds for their own lawsuits. The Colorado Attorney General's office had already contacted her firm about potentially joining their investigation into consumer protection violations. "We're not just talking about employment discrimination anymore," Elizabeth continued. "This is corporate fraud on a scale that could result in criminal charges for Richard and potentially Madison as well." But the most significant development came Tuesday afternoon when I received a call from Robert Pinnacle requesting an immediate meeting. His voice carried a weight that suggested monumental decisions were being made behind the scenes. We met at his home office in Cherry Hills Village, a modest study lined with photographs documenting 42 years of business relationships and community involvement. Robert appeared older and more fragile than I had expected, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had built a successful company from nothing. "Martha, I want to start by apologizing personally for what you've endured," he said, gesturing for me to sit across from his desk. "When I started Pinnacle in 1981, I promised myself that success would never come at the expense of treating good people badly." He opened a thick folder containing documents I didn't recognize. "I've spent the past week reviewing financial records that Richard thought I would never see. What I've discovered is worse than I imagined." The documents revealed systematic financial mismanagement dating back over 2 years. Client payments had been diverted to unauthorized accounts, expense reports had been filed for services never rendered, and several accounts showed evidence of double billing for the same work. Richard has been stealing from clients and covering it up by manipulating account records. Robert explained, his voice heavy with disappointment. The Madison situation was just the most visible part of a much larger pattern of ethical violations. Most shocking was Robert's revelation that Richard had been using company funds to pay for Madison's college tuition, her luxury apartment, and even her car payments, all disguised as consulting fees and research expenses in the corporate budget. "I've already contacted the FBI about the financial irregularities," Robert continued. "But beyond that, I want to offer you something that might sound impossible given recent events." He paused, studying my face before continuing. "I want you to come back to Pinnacle as Vice President of Operations with full authority to rebuild our culture and restore our reputation. I know it sounds insane, but that you're the only person with the knowledge, credibility, and moral authority to save this company." The offer was staggering in its implications. Robert was essentially asking me to return to the scene of my professional betrayal and take on the responsibility of cleaning up the mess that had been made. The financial package he outlined was generous, including equity stakes and performance bonuses that would make me one of the highest-paid executives in Denver's marketing industry. But something about the proposal didn't feel right. Returning to Pinnacle would feel like validating their behavior and accepting that good people should clean up messes made by corrupt leaders. I had found something valuable at Triumph, a culture of genuine respect and collaboration that I didn't want to abandon. "Robert, I appreciate your faith in my abilities," I said carefully, "but I have a counter-proposal that might better serve both companies and the industry as a whole." I suggested that instead of me returning to Pinnacle, we explore a merger between Pinnacle and Triumph under new ethical leadership. This would preserve the valuable client relationships and talented employees at both companies while creating a stronger organization built on principles of fairness and merit. "Marcus Sullivan at Triumph has expressed interest in expanding their operations," I explained. "With your backing and my knowledge of both organizations, we could create something unprecedented, a marketing agency that's publicly committed to transparent hiring practices and ethical business standards." Robert's eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm for the first time during our conversation. "That's brilliant, Martha. Instead of trying to repair a damaged reputation, we create something entirely new with a foundation of integrity." The proposed merger gained momentum quickly. Marcus was enthusiastic about the opportunity to expand Triumph's capabilities while incorporating Pinnacle's established client base. Robert's endorsement carried significant weight with investors and industry leaders who had been watching the scandal unfold. Most importantly, the merger provided a path forward for Pinnacle's ethical employees who had been trapped in a toxic culture they couldn't change. Jessica, Tom, and several others expressed relief at the prospect of working in an environment where merit would actually matter. Elizabeth's legal strategy evolved to support the merger proposal. Instead of seeking maximum financial damages that might bankrupt Pinnacle and hurt innocent employees, we focused on ensuring Richard's permanent removal from the industry and establishing precedents for accountability in future discrimination cases. "This outcome serves justice better than pure vengeance," Elizabeth explained during our strategy meeting. Richard faces criminal charges for fraud. You get vindication and a leadership role, and we establish legal precedents that protect other employees from similar treatment. The final piece of the puzzle came when Madison, feeling abandoned by her father and overwhelmed by public scrutiny, reached out to me directly. She was 23 years old and had been thrust into a situation that was far beyond her experience or capabilities. "Martha, I know what my dad did was wrong," she said during a tearful phone call. "I never asked for that promotion, and I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to help him because he said the company was struggling." Her willingness to testify about Richard's manipulation and her complete lack of qualifications for the senior role provided the final evidence needed to resolve all legal proceedings. Madison agreed to resign from Pinnacle and pursue opportunities more appropriate to her actual experience level. By the end of November, just 6 weeks after my original resignation, the transformation was complete. Richard had been terminated and faced criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. Pinnacle and Triumph had announced their merger under the new name, Pinnacle Triumph Creative, with me as Chief Creative Officer and Marcus as CEO. The press conference announcing the merger drew attention from business media across the region. Robert Pinnacle's statement captured the significance of what had transpired. Sometimes the worst crisis becomes an opportunity to build something better than what existed before. Martha Wilson's courage in standing up for what's right has given us the chance to create the kind of company we always should have been. 1 year later, I stood on the stage at the Denver Convention Center addressing 300 women at the annual Colorado Business Women's Conference. The irony of my presence there wasn't lost on anyone in the audience. 12 months earlier, I had been an invisible middle manager whose 13 years of dedication had been dismissed with a handshake and a hollow congratulations. This time last year, I thought my career was over. I began looking out at faces that reflected my own journey of struggle and determination. I had been passed over for a promotion I had earned watching someone with no qualifications receive opportunities I had spent 13 years working toward. The speech I delivered that morning wasn't about revenge or bitterness. Instead, I focused on the lessons learned from turning betrayal into empowerment and how standing up for the principle had created opportunities I never could have imagined. Pinnacle Triumph Creative had exceeded every projection for our first year of operation. We had grown from 43 employees to 78 with client satisfaction ratings reaching 96% and employee retention at unprecedented levels. Our transparent promotion policies and anti-nepotism guidelines had become a model studied by other companies across the industry. The most important thing I learned, I told the audience, is that staying silent about injustice doesn't protect you from its consequences. It just enables the behavior to continue and hurt other people. The transformation hadn't been easy. Rebuilding Pinnacle's reputation required months of patient work, honest conversations with former clients, and completely restructuring internal processes that had allowed corruption to flourish. But every challenge felt worthwhile when measured against the alternative of letting Richard's behavior go unchallenged. Jessica and Tom had both thrived in our new environment. Jessica was promoted to senior account manager based on her actual qualifications and performance. Tom became creative director for our digital marketing division, finally receiving recognition for innovations he had developed but never been credited for at Old Pinnacle. The legal proceedings had concluded with outcomes that satisfied justice without destroying lives unnecessarily. Richard faced substantial fines and a permanent ban from working in fiduciary positions, but avoided prison time in exchange for full cooperation with ongoing fraud investigations. Patricia and William faced professional sanctions but were allowed to rebuild their careers in other industries. Most surprisingly, Madison had found her path in nonprofit marketing, where her genuine enthusiasm for social causes translated into effective advocacy work. She called me every few months to update me on her progress and thank me for exposing a situation that had been unhealthy for everyone involved. I realize now that my dad wasn't helping me, she said during one of our conversations. He was setting me up to fail and damaging his relationship with good people like you. I'm grateful you had the courage to stop it before it got worse. The merger had created something unprecedented in Denver's business community, a marketing agency publicly committed to ethical practices and transparent decision-making. We published annual reports detailing our hiring and promotion statistics, created mentorship programs specifically designed to develop women and minority candidates, and established a scholarship fund supporting marketing education for underrepresented students. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the transformation of workplace culture throughout our industry. Other agencies began implementing similar transparency measures, recognizing that ethical practices weren't just morally right, but also good business. The Pinnacle standard became shorthand for hiring and promotion practices based solely on merit and qualifications. During my conference speech, I shared the letter I had received just that morning from a young woman named Ashley, who worked for a competing agency. She had been passed over for promotion in favor of her supervisor's cousin, but instead of accepting the decision silently, she had filed a formal complaint, citing precedents established in our case. "Your example gave me the courage to speak up," Ashley wrote. "I wanted you to know that the changes you created are still helping people fight for fairness in their own workplaces." Elizabeth Chen, who had become not just my lawyer, but a close friend, was in the audience that morning. She later told me that she had received inquiries from attorneys in 5 other states who were handling similar discrimination cases and wanted guidance on legal strategies we had developed. "Martha, you need to understand something," she said during lunch after the conference. "Your case didn't just get you justice. It changed how these cases are prosecuted nationally. The precedents we set are being used to protect other people facing similar situations." As I concluded my speech that morning, I looked out at an audience that included CEOs, entrepreneurs, middle managers, and recent graduates just starting their careers. Each face represented someone's daughter, sister, or friend who deserved to work in an environment where talent and dedication were the only currencies that mattered. "The most important lesson I can share," I said in closing, "is that you have more power than you realize to demand the respect you deserve. Sometimes losing everything you think you want leads you to everything you actually needed." The standing ovation that followed felt like validation, not just for my personal journey, but for every woman who had ever been told to be grateful for scraps when they deserved the full meal. That evening, Marcus and I met with Robert Pinnacle for dinner at the Brown Palace Hotel, our quarterly tradition for discussing company direction and celebrating our shared success. Robert, now 75, had remained actively involved as chairman emeritus, providing wisdom and institutional knowledge while supporting our progressive policies. "Martha, when I first called you a year ago, I was trying to save my company's reputation," he said over dessert. "I had no idea we would end up creating something better than anything I had built in 42 years. The numbers supported his optimism. Pinnacle Triumph had been named Denver's best place to work by the Colorado Business Journal, and we had been invited to present our employee development model at national conferences in Chicago and San Francisco. But beyond professional success, the past year had taught me lessons about personal worth and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who share your values. I had started dating again, finding relationship possibilities with someone who appreciated my strength rather than feeling threatened by it. I had reconnected with family members I had neglected during my years of single-minded career focus. Most importantly, I had learned to value myself appropriately and demand treatment that reflected my contributions. The woman who had quietly accepted Richard's betrayal no longer existed. In her place stood someone who understood that fighting for justice wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about creating change that protected other people from similar harm. As we finished dinner and prepared to leave, I reflected on the chain of events that had begun with a simple resignation letter and evolved into industry-wide transformation. Richard's attempt to quietly sideline me had instead exposed corruption, created legal precedents, and established new standards for ethical business practices. Sometimes, I said to Marcus and Robert as we stood in the hotel lobby, the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best chapter of your life. 2 years later, our company was featured on the cover of Harvard Business Review as an example of how ethical leadership and transparent practices could drive both profitability and employee satisfaction. The article's title captured the essence of our transformation, from discrimination to innovation, how one woman's courage changed an industry. The final validation came when Madison called to tell me she had been promoted to program director at her nonprofit based entirely on her own merit and hard work. "Martha," she said, "I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you were fighting for. Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like." Richard never contacted me directly, but I heard through industry sources that he had moved to Arizona and was working in a completely different field. Sometimes accountability means starting over completely, which seemed like appropriate consequences for someone who had built his success on taking credit for other people's work. The lesson that resonated most deeply from my entire experience was that true success isn't about climbing corporate ladders built on favoritism and lies. It's about maintaining your integrity, standing up for what's right, and creating opportunities where merit and character are the only currencies that matter. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted leads you to everything you actually needed. Sometimes the people who underestimate your strength accidentally give you the perfect opportunity to show them exactly how wrong they were. And sometimes the courage to walk away from what's comfortable creates space for something extraordinary to grow. If you've ever faced discrimination or unfair treatment in your workplace, I want you to know that speaking up is scary but necessary. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between staying quiet for security or speaking up for what's right? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if my story resonated with you and subscribe to my channel for more content about workplace advocacy and professional empowerment. Share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them, but by how they choose to respond when treated unfairly. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to never accept less than the respect and opportunities you deserve. Remember, your courage to demand better doesn't just change your life. It creates possibilities for everyone who comes after you.